Hi everyone! In this video I'm going to be sharing some of my tips and tricks on how to make decent vehicles in automation. That is the visuals only. I have absolutely no clue about the engineering, but I have been playing around quite a bit with the 3D modeling, fixtures, that kind of thing. So I'm going to share some of the things I've learned, see if that helps anyone, see if we can get some better cars out of this. Not that anyone's is poor, of course, but you know, share and share alike. So to begin with, before I actually dig into automation, I want to talk about the workshop. You really should come over to the workshop and have a browse through the mods. The nice thing about automation mods is you just attach them to a car and then they just download as basically Haringzord makes use of them, at least most of the time. The thing we've learned is to avoid paints. They don't export very well to Beam, even if they do sort of work sometimes. But you might be hit with the red curse. So when I say mods for automation, I'm looking at specific little fixtures that I can make use of in different designs that I make. There's mostly actual vehicle bodies that you can see here. And the other thing to look out for is only Unreal Engine 4.27 mods work at the moment, so a bunch of these will be like .24 or older mods, if that is they are listed at all. And if they're not, you just have to try it and hope it actually shows up, and if it doesn't show up, it's not compatible, which is a shame. But you know, most of the more recent ones will be, and most of the popular ones will be. But if you go through most subscribed, I mean, you can see here most of these are Unreal 4.24, and unfortunately these won't work. So I have quite a lot of mods I'm subscribed to, but more individual little bits of fixtures. Like I grabbed this radiator and fan the other day because I want those propeller blades for my round 2 vehicle, which you may be spoiled upon today, but hopefully not. Basically, I try and make use of just lots of fixtures because that's what I make these vehicles out of, rather than focusing on the chassis itself. There's the roll cages, which you saw featured in Daft Dave yesterday. And I won't go through all these, but maybe I could share a list of these somehow. I don't know. Anyway, the point is that the mods are really good, and you should use them. There doesn't seem to be too many issues with them, although avoid cheating, basically. There are some vehicle chassis which are not as balanced as the ones in the main game, and I think that's been rolled into the rules document that the Formula 1 bodies have wings at the front and back. That's been mentioned already. But you can make use of vehicle bodies, which can be quite cool. A lot of the more meme entries that we've seen are thanks to those. Have I got any here? There's the rocket exhaust I used yesterday. Here's a fun little kit car. Yeah, all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I guess I won't go too far into that, but I did want to start by mentioning the workshop. You know, make use of mods, they're really cool. The track body, that won't go horribly wrong at all, will it? Okay, so in automation, I'm first going to talk a little bit about my weaponized vehicle for Film 2, Cyberpunk, because the Gatling gun here was obviously a thing that I modelled. And before I really get into things, I suggest you always have references to hand if you're trying to actually model something after a real thing. So for this Gatling gun, I did some Google searches and came up with this image, which is what I based it on. You know, it's not an exact copy, but having this to hand really helps. Like, yeah, I'll make it this sort of shape, and it's these sort of dimensions. The point is, I'm not an artist or a 3D modeler of any kind, but people that are generally work from concept art. That's why concept art exists. People come up with cool designs like this who are more creative. and better at design, and then that gets translated into games in this way. Like this is actually how games are made. So you know, it's not cheating as such. it's I guess copying one thing is plagiarism, but copying lots of things is research. Anyway, you can sort of see the shapes that I've made use of here. It is a simplified version, but the barrels, the sort of cylinders that makes this up, the decal for the skull on here. I would not have come up with this by myself, but having the reference to hand lets me make something pretty cool looking, because I'm not creative. So I'm not going to go into this one right now. I'm going to do a full example shortly. But before I do, there's another quite interesting thing to talk about with this car, which is making use of the paint areas on a vehicle. You might have noticed that I make a lot of use of transparent paint. And on this car, the front bumper and rear bumper are transparent, because that front bumper should actually be showing up there. But it's transparent. Which lets me cut it off. So it depends on the areas that are paintable on a car. But you can make some really good use of making different parts of a vehicle transparent and others not. Like my Daft Dave car is the same car but with the roof cut off. By making that transparent and then the relevant bits of the trim. So I was quite proud of that. And that's a thing to look out for. You know, it depends on the chassis for which areas you can paint. So there's potentially areas you can cut off to make more interesting designs. Right, to really get into what I want to talk about, which is tips and tricks for doing the like 3D fixturing in automation here, we're going to do a full example of a car. I say a full one, at least I will at least start one. So let's make a new car. Come on. No, there we go. And as I said, I always try and work from references. So with Iron Brow's Expedition coming up, let's make some Dwarven artillery. This thing, it's got 4 wheels, which is quite good because you have 4 wheels in automation. And beyond that, you can basically make anything that you want in this game, I would say, depending how much time and effort you want to put into it. So starting from something like this, I would look at this and I go, yeah, okay, it's got 4 wheels. The wheels have these sort of sections on them, which you could do with fixtures, though they wouldn't spin around. Or we can just make the wheel look that colour. And then beyond that, we can basically make the entire vehicle transparent if we want to. And then just build this thing out of basically cuboids. The sort of pattern around the edges would be very hard to do. It'd be possible, but very hard. Like if you can see my cursor, these sort of mountains on the side might be easier if you take the quasi route of adding a million small fixtures into the right places, but that might be too much effort. Maybe you'll skip the detailing around there. But the general shape is what I'm looking for, and like where things are positioned and how big they are and what shapes they are. This is made out of lots of cuboids, which makes it fairly easy compared to some things. So let's have a go at making something like this. You can see I've got some different mods here showing up in my chassis list. So when I'm building a vehicle, you know, it generally is picked based on what would be a good fit for the thing I'm making here. Now this is a pretty normal car sort of shape, just looking at the wheels, that is. So almost anything would do for this, you know, depending on what restrictions we have on the round that we might be building this for in Track Attack. If it's for round 2, you've got the 1979 limit. But honestly, this thing, the wheels are actually fairly close together. That is not a long wheelbase. Almost anything should work if we're going to make everything else transparent. So let's just pick a very standard hatchback here. So I am not going to talk about the actual engineering side in any way here and just pick whatever. Yeah, let's just stick an engine in there. No spoilers. Does that fit? Hopefully. Okay, yeah. Ignore all this. Oh. Until we can actually do some design. Actually, we could have design company. I've skipped past it. Okay, so paint is pretty useful because you can make stuff invisible with transparency. The first thing to mention then is paint. You know, you can create paints here, which I think is worth doing, rather than trying to make use of global ones that you've stored. It's very useful to have this set of paints that are on the car, and then you want to use a small set of paints, I would say, to keep things consistent. So, you know, as you create these, let's create one now actually for the dwarven thing here. Let's create this sort of silvery colour. Very straightforward. You might want to mess around with the more advanced settings, make it less shiny, a bit less flake, a bit more, yeah, just a bit less shiny, I guess. It gives it a name, a random name by default, and then like that's the colour you want to be using on all devices. But for this one, we're going to make all this transparent, so there's a default somewhere. I have a lot of modded in paints here, which is not a good idea. As mentioned at the start, the mod paints don't export well to Beam, so try not to use those, just use the built-in ones. Don't fill your selection here with a load of crap like I have, but we want transparent, so let's take that, and basically let's make everything transparent right now. Now this does have some negative side effects, that like when you add fixtures, they'll now default to transparent, which is a bit unfortunate. But I'm going to just live with that. And the windows, which is this. Right, so you're probably aware of that. But if we go back to choosing the body, where we can morph the car, there are these advanced trim settings here, which not everyone might be aware of. You can move stuff around, you can move the engine around, which is handy. And there's a visibility thing here where we can actually hide the chassis, which is probably what we want for what we're doing today. There is this basic chassis, which you might want to use as well. That could be a good choice for us. Actually, yeah, let's go with that one so we can at least have a rough idea of where we want to place stuff. And as you can see, you can hide the engine and everything else if you really want to as well, which can be useful. I think I will for this one. Okay, so it's just some wheels on a chassis, a very basic one. Okay, yeah, before I get into more then, let's talk about the advanced options. Sorry about the dog. Shush. Alright. Because another thing you might not be aware of with all the sort of visibility settings down the side here is this free roam camera, which is also extremely useful if you want to make something unusual like a giant robot like I did. You may need to move the camera around in ways that the sort of fixed camera point doesn't let you, and that's pretty handy for that. You can use WASD to move around, right click to change the angle as usual, space to go upwards, and the mouse wheel changes the field of view, which is quite important actually. You can have a really weird field of view, that's the angle of the camera aperture. So yeah, sometimes the view in this looks strange because of how close and because of the field of view that you have. So that's something to keep in mind. And there's some advanced visibility controls here, which I want to play around with, especially for like window transparency. And that can be useful. Okay, so to really get into it, we're going to make this thing. So I would actually start with the wheels. And as I said, you can we could add stuff to the wheels and around the wheels. Now most fixtures that you add don't actually have clipping or collision detection in beam, and will just be there. There is the new option to make them have clipping and collision detection, which is apparently quite buggy at the moment. But if they sort it out, you might want that. That would actually be good for some of these more crazy designs that I do. Another option is we can actually make the wheels invisible and then build these out of fixtures. It wouldn't look as good because they're not going to spin around, but that might be something you want to do, especially if you want to build something like looks like it has two wheels or 3 wheels, or something with weird wheels like the Snotling pump wagon, because that has very thin, tall wheels, but they are the actual wheels, and it's quite hard to drive. So, as you'll know, you can change all the colours on the tyre here, but the tyre tread can be changed too, which you'll have seen. You could give it a textured paint, which might be a bit closer to this that we're looking for today. You might want to make them narrower, but you can't make them blocky. You can't change the shape, which is a shame. But you can change the hubcaps. Or, sorry, what should I be calling them? Wheels. And this is a good place to look at mods to bring in, because there's perhaps better options for the thing that you try to build here. Like if this is just basically fairly flat with just a nub in the middle, maybe that one's a good option. Something like that. Yeah, that one I'd say. Maybe you want to match up the paint on the wheel to the tyre. I'm going to skip over that for now, because what I really want to talk about is the fixtures. 3D fixtures. Okay. You can see on this selection I've actually got a fair number of mods which don't really make sense to be in this section. But regardless, I still mostly use the basic 3D shapes, particularly ones in this set, so, you know, cubes, whatever you call these, cylinders, the different sort of spheres and rings. Unsurprisingly, most things are just made out of different cube shapes stretched out, so let's do that for this. Let's just start with the base body. Very simple. Now, as I mentioned, there's a sort of gotcha here that the one I've got has defaulted to transparent. Let's go and grab that color. Okay, so we have a cube somewhere. The highlight of this video is this. It's these options here of the alignment of the fixture that you're adding. So by default, it aligns to the surface of the car. So as the car has a sort of curve to it, that's what it's aligned to. We don't want that because we made the car invisible. We want it to be basically at right angles to everything else, which is the cardinal lock on this locks it onto the cardinal XYZ axes. And then it's, whoops, there depends when you move it, or the horizon. I'm not quite sure what the difference between these two is. So for most things, as soon as I place a fixture, I will click cardinal lock on, and then switch it over to 3D positioning. So we can move around like this. So if you're not familiar with these controls, you've got the 3 axes. It is locking into the middle of the car, which is usually very useful, thanks to this setting here. So if you're trying to like just adjust it a little bit in the middle and you can't do, you need to switch that off, and then you can. But for the most part, you do want to make it lock to the center of the car, and then you can align things correctly. You can rotate in the different directions. Now, by default, that comes with a snap to angle of 15 degrees, selected, which I would recommend leaving on as much as possible, and then you can rotate things through 90 degrees easily, like that. You can press Ctrl Z to undo, which is very useful. You can turn off the snap to angle, and then you can do a free rotation, but I do not recommend that until you do actually want some very fine tuning. But for the most part, you want things roughly aligned to each other, so I would leave that on. These squares on the side let you move it in the 2 directions highlighted there. And the circle in the center, no, doesn't do anything in this view. And you basically toggle this between moving it around and scaling it in different axes, like this. So you can see this is what we want to do. But again, you have these squares, and these are very useful because they will evenly scale it in the 2 directions we're looking at there. The reason I bring that up is if this was a cylinder like this, let's get the color again, there it is. Let's just turn that over. Actually, I've already been messing around with this. Let's make a new one. So stick a cylinder on here. It's aligned to the car, it's transparent, it's a bit annoying. But there's a cylinder. If we want it cardinal lock on, then it's aligned to the, well, one of the main axes, and then 3D positioning. So we can move this thing around and rotate it with snap to angle switched on. I can easily align it into the right directions. Now, what I wanted to talk about was the scaling. If you have a shape like this, like a circle on this end, that you want to keep as a circle, you need to make use of the sort of 2-directional scaling here, so it will evenly scale in both directions and stay a circle. If you try and scale it that way and try and scale it that way, it'll roughly be a circle, but it won't be quite right, and that's not good enough. So that's important. And I think these things are used for moving and rotating. I've forgotten what they're for. I don't use them anymore. There's advanced settings here, as you can see, to change the sensitivity, but I never even play with those either. Just the snap to angle, the locking for the locking to the middle of the vehicle. Just that. Yep. And the arrows, as you see, just swapping between move and scale. There's probably a shortcut for this, but I've not learned what it is. And I always transform in local space. Maybe I don't want to do that, but I always do. So while we're here, let's talk about the other sort of key buttons that you have down here. Flipping vertical and horizontal isn't actually making an effective difference to this, but it is very useful in a lot of cases. But the most useful button is this, to mirror your fixture the other side of the car. If you're not aware of that one, hopefully you are. But that's obviously super useful. And I guess that's it. You've got the rotate buttons, but the real secrets to me are making good use of mirroring, but also cloning stuff in place. So if you have a bunch of connected shapes that are using the same basic shape, like if I wanted to make, I don't know, like a sort of dumbbell shape out of this cylinder here, I would clone it in place. You can move that there, but then clone another one. Now these are all aligned. What I can do now is take this middle one, scale it down in those 2 axes a little bit. But it's still aligned to these ones, scale it out, move it in place, and then we have a thing that's like nicely aligned with itself, and that's quite important. So the real secret, the real key to me is making good use of the clone button and then adjusting the positions of things. That comes in all the time for like getting stuff into the right place. There isn't any like snapping to the position of other fixtures in this game that I'm aware of, or don't think grouping works or is implemented. Hopefully I'm wrong, but otherwise everything is just sort of placing it by hand in the right place, judging it by eye, which is very difficult in 3D with a sort of somewhat not ideal camera like this. So that trick of cloning moving is super important, and another usage of that is you might move something, angle it a bit, move it some more, and keep doing that. whatever reason. You know, you might angle it, move it, clone it, move it more, have something using that. The possibilities are endless. But what I'm here to do is have a very quick go at building this. I'm not going to build all of it, but I will show those techniques in how I would make this. So as I said, start with a cube, it's invisible. Let's make it a color, cardinal lock on, position in 3D. Right, and then this can just be the base of the card, so we want to stretch it out a lot. Nope. And a lot of this is like shifting the camera around, looking at where things are, checking if it looks like it's the right place. I mean, this isn't great. In fact, I'm going to do a very quick and dirty job today. That's something. It's something. What I'm actually going to do is just do these sort of blocks here. Maybe the main part of the catapult, using those things that I mentioned. So for this, let's just stick another block on here. Let's give it a different colour this time. Let's make it that sort of more gold colour, which is not that colour. I don't know. Okay, we'll go with that. So, as always, cardinal lock on, 3D positioning, shift it over. This is on one side, so we want to mirror it. So this goes about here. I realize it's just a lot of like moving the camera around to see if this looks like it's in the right place. And there is the free roam camera, which can be better, can be worse. I make a lot of use of seeing when stuff clips into another fixture to see if it's like sort of aligned, if that's sort of there. You know, stuff you can clip through. There's no sort of downsides to clipping your fixtures into each other if it looks okay. What we're doing here, so actually making a larger thing than that. Oop. You've got this little bit on the side, which we could have a go at. It's not going to be amazing, but this is somewhere that I would make use of the cloning. So if I clone this thing, I can move this piece out here, and now it's all aligned and it's the same size until I do that, move in that direction. And now that is exactly aligned with the width of the first piece. And that's something, that's useful. And then there's the tricky bit if we want like a sort of triangle wedge shape like this to finish it off. And we'll just have to do this by eye. So cardinal lock on, 3D, oops, move it over here. Oh, on that note then, so as you're clicking around these fixtures, if you're not aware, you have a list down the side here where the most recent thing that you added is at the bottom. So if you like lose track or can't click on the thing that you were just messing with, it should be at the bottom of this list. And that's pretty useful as well. So let's mirror that. Now this will be tricky, so we just have to do lots of like measuring by eye. It looks like it's about the right width, and if you use the default width that it spawns as, that can be useful too. But I'm going to put that there. Make it a bit bigger that way. And this one I'm going to try and really align properly. Not trying to get up to the top, just trying to get it to match here. So one thing you could do, if it's just a tiny bit smaller, you just clip it into that one. That's sort of fine. It's not quite. And so basically this is where lots of time goes. That's not too bad. And if I was being better about this, I would just spend a bit of time aligning it. So yeah, there's no easy shortcuts here. You just have to move these things around until you're happy with them. But say that that's done. Looking at this, we want to pass the back as well. So again, I make a lot of use of cloning whenever I can now, and have something over here and make sure that's totally aligned, but might be a bit smaller and a bit narrower, but it is the same width. that's useful. So we have some blocks. This is not in the right size for this thing. But let's press on. We have the main catapult. Now this is at an angle, and that's where I'll make use of the snapping stuff to angles. So let's add another cube. Make it this color. Always cardinal lock on. 3D. Let's make this a bit narrower. Maybe a bit smaller that way. But long. There we go. Mirror it. If I can adjust that to the side a bit. There we go. Maybe a bit too big for what I want right now. So I'll scale it down. Looks about right. Move it over here. And then do 2 notches. And remember that so I can make use of that same angle. So it's probably 30 degrees. You know, sort of position it in the right place. One important thing then is if you want more stuff at the top here, we can now clone this thing to get something in exactly the same place that we can then reposition to be a different thing that we want it to be. Like if it's that section at the top, it's a scaled down version that's there. Might be a bit wider, but still, you know, it's all aligned to itself because it's just cloned and moved around in those same directions. So that's useful. And if we want to do something a little more complicated, like this wheel here with its indentations, I'd probably make that out of like concentric sort of discs, circles, sort of mug shapes. Let's have a go. That one's actually really tricky because there isn't a good built-in 3D shape other than something like these. And these are a bit too thin and flat. But let's have a go anyway. So stick that in the middle of the car. Let's turn it around a bit. And then scaling lets us give that some depth. Make a different color. Oops, you don't want to change it in that one direction. If you want to make it bigger or smaller, you use the 2 here. Why is it not that color? Must have undone it. So I probably combine that with an actual, I forgot what the shade this is called, but one of these. It's not quite as shiny, which is a shame, but it's because of the shape of it. So cardinal lock on, 3D, rotate. Unfortunately, that rotates at the base of the shape there, so we'll have to move it around. It's locked in the middle, so we'll have to unlock the fixtures and do this one by eye. And then when we've got that, try and get that in the right place. So it probably wants to be between these 2 sort of grey beams. Scale it up like that, probably make it a bit thinner. Yeah. And unfortunately in this case, I guess there isn't an easier option than just, well, that's not in the middle at all. And it's just lots of adjusting. Yeah, and unfortunately this won't align perfectly with it, and that will just need some time of like scaling it up and down until you can eventually like make it pop out the sides a little bit. But when we do that, like that, then we can clone that one and then scale it down. Like that, and then clone that and scale that down. Like that. And that's how you can do an effect like that. Which isn't perfect, but it's something like that. It's like it's actually the opposite of that. I could do with more like a wider lip. But basically that's the approach I take. I guess that's it. So, you know, the real secrets to me are making use of the clone, and then you can move and adjust things so that they align with other things that you've placed. Always make sure you have a reference like this or this, even for a small part, if it's quite important to your car that might be weaponized. And go nuts. And the more references of the exact same model or thing that you have can help. This is quite nice actually to have the front and back at an angle. I've got several for my next vehicle, but that will be spoilers, so I won't share that. And yeah, I think that's it. So making use of the angle, the alignment. I want this in the middle now, but I forgot to switch this back on. There we go. There it is, because it's the most recent item added. It is transparent, which is a shame. If you're working on a vehicle that's totally transparent. You can use 2D positioning, of course, if you want to attach to the shape of the vehicle underneath. Actually, that's surprisingly exactly aligned to the car. Maybe you want to make use of that, you know, maybe we should have aligned the catapult with the edge of the car here that you can't see, and do things that way. It's the window, really, isn't it? As I said, make a set of paints for your vehicle, then you can just reuse those, and you can then come in here and edit that instance of that paint if you want to adjust how it appears all over the car. That's handy. Otherwise, just go nuts with fixtures and attach them to things. There is this Lego mod, which is mostly Lego pieces, which you don't use, but you might want to. But there's a bunch of pieces at the end here which are plain and do not have Lego studs on them. These ones, which can do as more 3D shapes. But the reason I bring it up is that this mod works like a lot of attachments where they can actually fall off the vehicle, and that can be quite fun for crashes and things. So sometimes make use of those, but if you want to stay on the car, you use the normal 3D fixtures. Anything else? So you've seen how transparent paint is useful. You might want to make use of that on other fixtures to make parts of them transparent. Especially on headlights and things that have like lots of sections to them, where, I don't know, for some reason you might not want the silvery part. Oh, so yeah, I talked about the fan attachment, which is probably somewhere in here. Let me find that for a second. Grab a bunch of interior stuff because that's always useful for making a cool interior. Same for exhausts, wheels. Basically, the more mods, the better, in my opinion. If it comes to fixtures, because you can always do something cool with them, even if it's not what they're intended for. Handily highlighted as mods here. Yeah, if it's not in 3D, I don't know where that fan. Of course I do. It'll be something like this, or this, or this. So that's a lot of stuff. Not actually made use of these. Oh well, the point was, if you've got a more complex fixture, you can make small bits of it invisible, which is another useful trick too. But don't add your wings and make those invisible, because that's cheating under our rules. Yeah, I guess that's it. You know, it does take a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, but it's worth it. It's cool. You can do completely unique stuff. And I guess that's it. So ask me any questions you might have. yeah, otherwise, thanks for watching.